What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. So look, I got a question to all boxing fans. Is Errol Spence Jr. being insensitive to the mental issues of Danny Garcia? Is the truth being insensitive to Danny Garcia, right? And I ask that because after Danny Garcia put on a masterclass performance against Jose Benavidez, Danny just recently moved up to 154. He looked good. The extra weight looked good on him. He looked like, he put on a great performance and he looked like Danny Swift of old. And so after the fight, of course, he was emotional. He had went through a string of losses in his career recently. And I'm sure, there's a lot going on in his personal life, right? And he spoke about it, and he spoke about how he had been depressed. And he started crying after the victory. And everybody was, Jim Gray was commending him because most athletes wouldn't be courageous enough to talk about those things and stuff like that. And so a lot of people were commending Danny and really uplifting him during the time. But for those who didn't know, leading up to the fight, leading up to Danny's fight against Jose Benavidez, people were asking him about his fight against Errol Spence Jr. And Danny was basically saying that, he was blaming it, basically his loss on his depression, his mental state at the time, his mental state and, his depression and everything he was going through. He was leaning towards that being the reason why he lost to Errol. That was the reason why he wasn't himself. He wasn't who he normally is coming into the ring. That wasn't the real Danny Swift Garcia. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what they were alluding to. The fact that, the depression got in the way of him being mentally sharp enough to go and take out Errol Spence Jr., right? And so after the fact, Errol Spence, he ain't like that, right? So he gets on Twitter and says, Danny, meaning Danny Garcia, Danny and his pops need to stop making excuses of why they lost to me. Nobody trying to hear that shit for real. Laugh out loud. And then he says, I don't care about none of that weak ass shit, right? Then somebody asks Errol, what do you care about exactly? To which he replied, my parents and my kids, right? Fair enough. So then he goes on to tweet, people trying to figure out how they're going to pay their mortgage or their rent every month, etc. Like I said, I don't give a fuck about none of that. And I don't care who think what about what. Like basically he's saying he don't care who think what about whatever he's saying. Fuck, I care about a rich N-word being depressed. I'm sure my elders felt worse than me, right? So let's break down everything Errol Spence said. Errol Spence saying basically, man, look, he don't care nothing about no depression, none of that. He not really sympathizing with none of that. It's people that are going through much worse times in America trying to pay rent with inflation. Like inflation is crazy. People getting their rent is getting raised. People struggling to figure out how they're going to live month to month. He's not really feeling empathy for a person who's a millionaire being depressed in this situation, right? And people is it harsh? So yes, I think, Errol, I don't agree with Errol saying basically he don't care nothing about a millionaire being depressed because people can have a whole lot of money and still be, depressed and down and out. A lot of the wealthiest people kill themselves from depression, right? I don't think all the time depression is always associated with just poor people. It's people with affluence. It's people who are pretty well off or decent, doing pretty decent for themselves, who still battle with a lot of different issues that they may be going on in their personal life, whether it be, loss of a loved one, whether it be loss of a job, whether it be loss of, so on a lot of different things, right? So I don't think that depression is exclusive to people who are poor. However, I understand what Errol Spence is saying. Errol Spence is basically telling Danny Garcia, don't try to discredit my win against you. You and your pops. Stop trying to discredit my win. Because Errol dominated Danny. He beat Danny he beat Danny worse than Danny has ever been beaten before. No, Danny's face ain't never looked like that until he fought Errol Spence. Errol did everything he wanted to do to Danny except knock him out. Seriously, he had his way. It was a clear dominant performance, and he looking like, don't try to take away from my dominant performance and try to downplay it by saying, oh, I lost. I only won that fight because you were depressed. I only won that fight because you weren't yourself. I only won that fight because you were mentally not there. That's not cool, because Errol is looking at it from this point. I was in a car accident, right? A bad car wreck. Now, while Errol's car wreck is due to his own actions because he had been drinking, he's saying, look, a lot of people counted me out. People said I wasn't going to be the same. People said I was going to be a shell of myself. And I put on this great masterclass performance against you. And now you're trying to belittle that by saying I didn't, I lost or I won the fight only because you were depressed. That's the only reason why you lost. You saying the only reason why you lost the fight because mentally you weren't where you needed to be? That ain't cool. And I feel Errol on that, man. Listen, this is a gladiator sport. Wins and losses happen in this sport. Things happen. Guys get into the ring with all different type of stuff that they're facing. I'm sure Errol Spence Jr. had a lot of doubt and stuff in his head. Now, these two individuals dealt with it differently. Danny chose to show it outwardly in front of the public. Errol probably kept his in and did it behind closed doors. They both had different ways of showing it, but Errol like, hold on. I went through a lot of different things on my end. I was wondering if I was going to be the same at times. People doubting me. People were giving support, but it was a lot of other people too that were also saying things like trolling them, being malicious, saying, hey, I don't care nothing about a drunk driver. You could have killed somebody's kids. Fuck you. I hope you never are the same. You're a trash individual for driving drunk. You could have killed somebody, so on and so forth. And he said, you know what? I accept that. It is what it is. And so he looking like, man, I probably was in the same mental state too. Like, where I didn't know if I was going to be the same. I was probably down and out because I didn't know if I was going to have the same boxing career as I once did. But he like, listen, I went in there and did what I did and I looked like magic. Don't try to diminish that. Don't try to take away from that win and make it seem like I only beat you because this, that, and the third. No, I had a great win. It was a great comeback win, a statement win for me after my car wreck. Let me keep that. Let me keep that accolade close to my heart. Don't try to take that away from me. Don't try to strip that from me by trying to discredit it. So he's pissed about it. And this is the thing too. I think Errol is saying this because when he first beat Sean Porter, Danny Garcia hopped in the ring saying he wanted to fight Errol. He called out Errol, right? Which means that he believed that he could beat Errol at that time. And then after Errol had the car accident and Errol came back, Danny Garcia was still pressing forward for that fight. So look, you took the fight. You feel like you could still beat me with whatever you probably were dealing with. You feel like you could still be victorious. Danny was talking confidently in the fight. Now, granted, confident talk don't mean nothing because people can say whatever they want to say and still don't be confident within their heart, within their mind. But at the same time, Danny was saying he was going to beat Errol and he was ready and he was all the way ready and thorough and so on and so forth. And he was going to thoroughly win and all this and all of that. And it didn't happen. So, brother, that's on you. Don't say you lost because of depression. No, just say I was the better guy that night, like you said. Like you said after the fight, because Danny was gracious after the fight. He gave all props to Errol, but Errol looking like, now, I know Danny's not voluntarily just saying he only lost to Errol because of mental issues, but the reporters are asking him, and he's still saying that. He should have just said, hey, man, you know what? I wasn't on my game. Errol came back and beat me, whatever. But you know what? He won because he was the better man, not because of whatever I was going through. He was the better man. Look, I would love to run it back with him again at 154, and I think I could come out on top this time. But don't associate your loss to the mental depression, so on and so forth, because it's gonna look like, man, you really trying to slight me in a way. And the fighter that you lost to is gonna feel a certain way, like, man, hell no, bro. I beat you, and I beat you better than anybody ever beat you. Let me keep that credit, man. And he looking like, well, you were confident before the fight. So why make excuses? And you were confident. You said you gave me my props after the fight. So why now, right after your big victory and before your fight against Jose Benavidez, are you trying to say that depression was the reason that you lost? So that's why Errol is feeling mad and upset. Yes, I feel like Errol is wrong in saying and making it seem that depression is often just associated with people who are poor, because that's not true. I don't co-sign that, what he said, kind of how he was alluding in that direction. I don't agree what he was alluding to in that sense, even though I'm a huge Errol Spence fan and everybody that watches his channel knows that. But I do feel like Errol is right in being pissed off that Danny and Angel Garcia are trying to discredit what he did to him. Because Errol put on the beating on that boy, man. Like, for real, had that jab in Danny's face and eye all night long, and it was nothing Danny could do. He couldn't do anything to make Errol uncomfortable, to throw it off. Errol was walking Danny down at times, for real. So, Errol like, man, look, let me keep my credit, bro. You can say you went through depression and all that. Just don't try to say it in reference to the fight that we had to minimize my victory. That's all he's saying, and I feel that. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Comment on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video as well. I appreciate y'all for rocking with me. Machiavelli Mills TV. I'm out. Peace.